Coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast. I'm Kate.
And I'm Laura. And this week we're continuing on with the theme of dads, but turning our attention to Luke, the surprise dad of the series. I think we were all shocked when a 12-year-old girl came out of the woodwork and DNA tested his hair to see if he was her father. And the storyline is almost universally hated for what it did to Luke and Lorelai's relationship. So we're kicking it off with a discussion about Anna and her choices and actions throughout the course of April's life and relationship with her dad. Next week, we'll be looking at some of Luke's best and worst parenting moments. And finally, the week after that, we're going to deep dive into how Lorelai fit into the whole picture, because we sure as heck have feelings about that whole situation.
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. But in the meantime, it's now time for me to uphold my contractual obligation to remind you this is a Spoilers All podcast. If you have no idea what we're talking about, if you haven't made it to season 6, GTFO, before we ruin everything for you. We might have already in the intro. Just, if you don't want spoilies, get out of here. Further spoilies. And if you could quickly do those YouTube-y things, like, subscribe, share, drop us comments about your thoughts and feelings on what we're talking about here today, or other stuff. If you just feel like ranting about something else, it feels like the Luke thing to do. So there's that. And last but not least, you might hear zoomies. Zoomies have entered the chat. The cat has been heard. So, not sorry.
No.
Okay, let's kick this off with sort of like a general question. And this isn't like a big topic or anything, but like, did we like the Luke dad storyline overall? How did you feel about it? Like, I guess, does giving him a daughter undercut any other storylines or other relationships? Or does it help him understand Rory and Lorelai on a different level? Would it have been better to leave him biologically childless to emphasize his relationship with Jess? And Rory, for that matter? Or, would it improve or hinder his relationship with Lorelai to be childless himself, thus reinforcing her special bond with Rory? I don't know. Give me some of your, like, high-level thoughts on Luke as a dad.
As a dad to April and that storyline, I would give it like a 3 out of 10. I really am not fond of it or care for it. I just think, again, we say this a lot. I just feel like it was lazy writing to insert April in that way. Because you could, if you needed to create conflict within Lorelai and Luke's relationship, there are so many other ways that you can do it besides like just reverting back to the trope of like, oh, child that we never knew existed coming to light. Like, it's just, I feel like too much of an easy go-to. And I would have loved to have seen him, like what you were just saying and alluding to, parent Jess more, even after he's out of high school and into his early 20s, just because he's legally a full-fledged adult, like he still is in need of guidance. I would have loved to have seen their relationship continue on a little bit more, keep advising him on a career path. And I did think that it undercut the bond with Rory, which was not always a parental bond. And we'll talk about that too. I think Luke definitely fell into the camp for me of always just being a fun uncle type of character. But I would have loved to have seen him just continue to mentor Jess a little bit more, have more scenes with them together as he's trying to even find his feet as a young man in his early 20s. I did think it took away from his relationship with Rory and Jess both. The only reason why I would probably give it, some points, 2 or 3, is just because I think it did make him appreciative of how hard it is to be a parent and to be responsible for a child. And granted, he was with Jess before, but Jess was pretty much like, cooked, autonomous, just F you, I'm going to go do my own thing anyway. I don't need you to parent me. But April was definitely in need of that actual supervision, that care in a way that Jess wasn't. So I think it opened Luke's eyes into what being a parent actually means and how difficult it could be. And I think it's definitely something that he considered as he was getting into, a marriage with Lorelai, and then speculating on, do we want to have like another child? Do we want to go that route? So I think it definitely opened his eyes to that world and the difficulties behind it. But on the whole, no, I really don't like the storyline. I think it was largely unnecessary. There are so many better ways that drama could have been created. And again, I would have loved to have seen not even more scenes with Rory, but just more between Luke and Jess.
I pretty much completely concur with you on everything you just said. Yeah, it really felt like a storyline that was shoehorned in to create tension. They knew that they were coming up on the end of the Rory and Lorelai separation, and so they had to throw something else in that like upped that ante to give us a story for the back half of season 6. And in a lot of ways, it feels like a fumbling of the bag because it just is so infuriating, you know? Just, I feel like Anna is universally hated, and we'll get into exactly why that is in a little bit. But to, introduce two characters who are not beloved. I love Vanessa Morano. She is a sweetheart and a totally amazing person and a great actress. But April is sort of like, what does she add to the show as a character? Not a whole lot. She's just sort of an obstacle for Luke and Lorelai to have to get over. And Anna is just like GTFO level character. Nobody likes her. She serves no purpose except to antagonize Luke. And it just, I don't know, the whole thing felt very inorganic. It didn't work for a lot of people, us included, it seems. I mean, there are some good moments where having to be a parent, especially in sort of like a surprise capacity, if you will, does bring out some good qualities in Luke, and it does teach him some stuff about life. But in the end, they didn't do a good enough job of integrating it into his life with Lorelai. And by the time we get to the revival and they're talking about like, hey, did you ever want a fresh kid? like, it just sort of drives the nail home that Luke missed out on his kid's childhood. And it's just pain and strife instead of what could be a very heartwarming story, or could have paved the way for a Luke and Lorelai pregnancy. I mean, I think you see the seeds of that starting to be sown in season 5 with the pregnancy scare. And then it's sort of dropped. And, Lorelai's relieved about that. And I'm like, but it almost seemed like they were going to go a different direction with it. Maybe if Amy and Dan had stuck around for season 7 and 8, maybe they would have had like Lorelai and Rory pregnant at the same time, which would have been wild. But we never got that because of this, I think. I mean, I don't know what else they would have done, but it didn't sit right. It didn't land, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And again, I just feel like it's nothing on Vanessa, because I will echo what you said. Marvelous human being, phenomenal actor. But even how they wrote her, you wrote her in a way where the fandom just really predominantly just doesn't even like her either. And it leaves such a bad taste in my mouth, because it's like, we're hating on a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. Why do that to us? We shouldn't have to be railing on a kid just because she was inserted just really falsely, prematurely, in a way that should have never been done, and then is just written to be this character that just makes us like cringe every single week and just want more of anything else besides her. It does her discredit as well, and just leaves us largely uncaring about her well-being. Any scenes with her and Luke, it's just, why can we move on? And again, I just will say, you could have taken that time and explored other characters a little bit more that you already have fleshed out, and just work on their arcs, instead of just, no, we're just gonna, thank you next to them and bring in April. And even her introduction, I think, is just like the science fair thing of it all, and just like, I'm gonna, take your hair against your will, whether you like it or not, for DNA testing. Like, am I watching CSI or am I watching Gilmore Girls? What, like, did I change channels by mistake? What is happening?
Yeah. They feel like a cut rate Lorelai and Rory. Anna and Lorelai have been compared numerous times, and April is very much like Rory, just that sort of like too smart for her own good, very self-actualized at a young age kind of character. And it's just like, haven't we seen this before and done better? So that's part of it. But that kind of brings me on to the Rory of it all. And you did sort of allude to this as well. But I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people in Facebook posts or in other fandom discussions being like, Luke was such a dad to Rory. Like, he was a better dad to her than her dad was. And I'm like, I'm here to dispel that notion. So I want to kind of just do a little bit of this now and sort of get it out of the way at the beginning of this conversation. So I don't think he was really a father figure to Rory because, you know, to be a father figure, it means that the kid has to look up to you and think about you like a father figure, and you need to provide the kind of support and guidance that a parent would actually provide. And Luke and Lorelai didn't even meet until 8 years before season 5, so like 3 years before this, no, 5 years before the series. Okay, the timeline feels wonky to me, but so like Rory would have been 11, and like, yeah, season 5 has such bizarro timing. I don't even think they knew what they were doing, because in episode 3, Luke says he's had the horoscope for 8 years. But by that point, yeah, no, okay, I guess it kind of tracks. Anyways, we'll get to the other part of it that's weird in a minute. But he's only known Rory since she was 11. He even says it when Rory runs into them in Philadelphia, and he's introducing her to April, and she's like, I've known her since she was about your age, to April. And now April is 12, about to turn 13. And so he wasn't there for the early formative years of her life. They were not friends. He was not a presence. And while you can have figures come into your life at basically any point and provide some sort of fatherly role, 11 is a little bit late for a significant impact on her development. Earlier in her stages of attachment would have been more important. And so she's already sort of developed the way that she interacts with most people, if that makes sense. And I don't think she looks at him as a substitute for her dad, because he wasn't like around all the time. I like what you said about him being the fun uncle. He's the one who comes to the birthday parties and brings her gifts and, you know, maybe helps out around the house a little bit, but he's not a primary caregiver. He never is. Not when he's with Lorelai is he either, because she's already off at college. Like, there's nothing about their interactions or their history that reads to me as him acting in such a way as to be like the masculine figure in her life that teaches her how to interact with other men or other people in general. I think he's just sort of like there by default as a townie, and he's a really great guy. You know, he does a lot of very nice things for them, but I don't think that amounts to replacing her father in her development or in her life.
Yeah, and you just have to, I think, even look at the, even just a very basic definition of what is constituted within parenthood, and it's financial provision. Luke doesn't do that. I mean, Lorelai, asks him for loans, other times for other things, but he's not, cutting child support checks, even, not being a biological father. He's not, helping them pay the bills in any sort of way, funding Rory's upbringing. He's not, substantially emotionally investing in her life. Granted, I think, he is there for her at times of need when she, just has a general question about something or is floundering. Like, he's there to offer that support, but he's not going out of his way to constantly, call her once or twice a week and be like, hey kid, how's it going? Is there anything that you need to talk about? What's going on in your life? Tell me. And likewise, she is not actively going to Luke and making those same phone calls saying like, I'm having trouble at school. I could really use someone to talk about it. I'm having boy problems. Why did, like, from a grown man's perspective, why did my boyfriend do this to me? They don't have that sort of relationship either, where he's providing emotional investment in her life in any sort of profound and consistent way. He's just there to, again, like, will use this term again, do the fun uncle things. Like, set up a balloon on her chair in the diner when it's her birthday, and have pie waiting. Help her move a mattress into college. Again, offer support if she is just like, oh, I have a general basic life question. Yeah, what's up, kid? Like, what can I do? But he's not a father figure in the way that, and granted, Christopher is not either. We've talked about that in the past too, but he's not there 24/7 in the way that you would define a dad, like that a normal father figure or a dad would be. He just, again, does the fun uncle things and is just there for support when it's needed, but doesn't seek out any sort of more direct relationship. And likewise, Rory doesn't counter and go after him for that either.
Yeah, all true. Which brings me to season 5, which I was alluding to a moment ago, when it's the wedding renewal episode and Rory is discovered in the bridal suite with Logan, and both Christopher and Luke get the whole like scary dad with the shotgun vibe, which I hate, by the way. Just gross. Rory is an adult. It doesn't matter. Get over yourselves. But I really don't like the conversation between the two men there, because Luke's like, where the hell were you when she got the chicken pox and would only eat mashed potatoes for a week? That's part of the thing where I'm like, what is the timeline on this? Because most kids get chicken pox like really, really young. So I'm like, you didn't know her when she was young enough to get the chicken pox. Anyway, and then he goes on, where were you when she graduated high school or started college, huh? Who the hell moved her mattress into her dorm and out of her dorm and back into her dorm? And to me, this conversation is Luke using his like the most basic level of father figure like behavior as a way to have a pissing contest with Christopher. It highlights some of the most basic crap as a way to enhance his own status over him and in the eyes of Lorelai. Everybody says that Chris only comes around to Lorelai when it serves him. It's not about his relationship with Rory. It's about whether or not his relationship with Rory can get him a relationship with Lorelai. But Luke is exactly the same. Do you think he would have like given any F's about Rory if he wasn't in love with Lorelai after all these years? Does he ever take interest in another young townsperson who isn't related to him? No. Like, he does a lot for Lorelai, but not much very specifically in support of Rory as a supportive father figure. I think it's because it feels like he's always around, but it doesn't mean that he's there for her in that capacity as much as he's credited for. And, I don't think he ever would have escorted her to a debutante ball. I don't even know that him being at her graduation is equivalent to being a father figure. And one thing that occurred to me is that it's possible he was only at graduation because Jess failed. Rory mentions it when Jess calls. Remember when she was just like talking to herself on the phone? And obviously we see Jess is there, but she's like, fine, I'll talk. She mentions, you didn't take me to my prom. You weren't here for my graduation. And so it makes me think that the tickets were initially for Richard and Emily, Suki and Jackson, and Jess. And so Luke was probably like the last person on the list who was invited after like everyone else had been, given a right of first refusal. And so I'm just like, everyone just harps on that moment so much. And I'm like, we already covered the whole why Chris might not have been there thing. But the Luke stuff, I think they shoehorned it in after Jess was written off the show and when they couldn't get Christopher. And so that was my take on that. And then you also mentioned moving her into the dorm. He was never initially helping. Like, that was never part of the plan to help with the move. The only reason he was roped into it was because he let Lorelai borrow the truck, which was a manipulation on Lorelai's part in the first place, where it's just like, don't you care about Rory? He tells Lorelai she should have hired movers.
Yeah, exactly. And just going back to what you said too, it's like, in my mind, it's just like, oi, with the male egos, and just, I think you said it perfectly. Like, it's just a pissing contest where it's like, I did better. I was here. You were not. No, how dare you? Let's check off the boxes. Like, who was, there, like the chicken pox box. I got it checked off. You don't. I've got the college box checked off. You don't. I've got the high school graduation box checked off. You don't. And it's like, if you really both care about Rory, you should not, that's the last thing that you should be doing. It shouldn't be who did better. It's just, this isn't a contest. Just both be there for her. But you let your egos come front and center in that moment, which is disgusting to me. And again, if you really cared about Rory, it's not about who did more. It's just about, let's just continue to be there for her in all of the ways that we can be. This is not I scored 10, you scored 8, I win sort of scenario. That's not what parenting is.
It's true. It's behavior we've seen from him before, frankly, with Max. There was that pissing contest too. And so it very much fits into his personality to try to get one up on the guys in Lorelai's life. And that's all that read as for me. And yeah, going back to the moving day stuff, like, it was nice of him to be like, breakfast is on the house today. But he was going through his own stuff at that moment too. Like, he was in the early stages of his divorce from Nicole. He wasn't really like mentally planning on being part of this moving day. And like, granted, this is a little bit different because I went to school on the other side of the country, but none of my family, like my parents, my direct parental figures, dropped everything they were doing to help me move. My grandparents were the ones who brought me, and it was only because I was staying with them before I started school. Like, I had never been out to BC before, and I stayed with them on Vancouver Island for 2 weeks before school. My sister and her husband came with us as well, but they left after a week. And so I spent an additional week with them, and then they brought me across to Vancouver and, helped me with the initial unloading of the car. But there were also a lot of like volunteers who were helping people unload their cars. That's what they do. And I didn't begrudge my parents for not dropping everything in their jobs and their lives and whatever else they had going on to help me move into my freshman dorm. And on top of that, after helping move her in, Luke does nothing that I remember. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember him participating in anything else. He doesn't go to her journalism panel. Chris does. He doesn't help her move into any dorms after this. The only thing we see him really do is accompany Lorelai to Rory's 21st birthday party. And I'm like, was he even invited? Because Emily says there wasn't a chocolate box for him. You would think that if he was like her father figure, Rory would act like there would be a specific invitation to Lorelai and Luke Danes, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, did she even invite him? Or did Emily make that call because she didn't want him there? I don't know. But he was mostly Lorelai's buffer at the Gilmore house. And like, he doesn't participate in anything with Rory after she leaves high school, basically. And then I guess that brings us to the graduation party, which is kind of the next time we see him do anything. But I contend he did that for Lorelai because he didn't say anything about like, I'm so excited to celebrate Rory. It's all for her. I love her so much. I'm so proud of her. She deserves this. No, you know what he says? He says to Lorelai, I just like to see you happy. He did this for Lorelai. He was doing the food for the initial party, but like a lot of people from the town were pitching in. Luke is the obvious choice to do food, especially now that they're friends again. And, Luke is one of the few people in the town who has the resources and the cachet to be able to pull off the party on short notice when Lorelai is no longer able to because of the tighter turnaround. And so, he's the only one who's going to fight Taylor on the stupid permits for barbecuing in the square and to be able to like rally people together because, despite his gruffness, people do love Luke. And it feels more like he's doing it for Lorelai because he knows how important it is for Lorelai to celebrate Rory. And like, I literally never hear it come out of his mouth. Like, yay, Rory. I love Rory. This is for her. If it were truly her graduation party, he should have been like, this is for her. But he's done it for Lorelai.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that sentiment. I mean, I think, in season 7, when they're doing her send-off, the staying up all night, sewing, quilt material together for like a tent. Again, it's for Rory's benefit so that she can have her party. But even that was something where he's like, I'm just doing this to impress Lorelai because it means a lot to her to be able to send off her kid in this way. And I think even Suki acknowledges that, where, you know, when they're at that party, she says, well, he stayed up all night to do that for you and for Rory. But it's like, I really just think that was more for Lorelai as well. And just bouncing off of that, I think that it's not that he dislikes Rory as a person. I think there is, you know, some sort of fondness there for her. And I think it's also just because he can, this is really the only way I can think to put it, tolerate her as an adolescent, because she's very well behaved. She doesn't act out, you know, she's not your typical rambunctious teenager. And I think that's why Luke is able to, again, tolerate her. But on the whole, Luke Danes just does not like children. So the fact that he can get along with Rory in the way that he does is, again, just, I think, a testament to how mature, you know, and well-rounded she is in that regard. But again, he doesn't ever invest in any other young person's life in Stars Hollow, because he just, again, he doesn't like kids. That's not who Luke Danes is. So I don't think this is about Rory and, oh, I love her as a potential stepdaughter sort of, you know, person, or I have genuine, like, I'm so proud of my kid. Like, look at her go. She just, you know, won first place at like a softball tournament. Not that Rory would be playing softball, but he did it for Lorelai. I would echo that. And it's just, again, not for Rory, and not even for her well-being, because he's not fond of young people. I mean, he can't even get along with his own nephew some of the time. So it really is just, I think, about like, I'm just doing this to try and get the girl.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, it's great what he does for them, you know? Like, I don't want to diminish the fact that, like, he did a lot for them, but I would contend that it was predominantly done for Lorelai. And he knew how close they were, and he knew that they were a package deal. And if he was in love with her, he had to, you know, play ball with Rory, metaphorically speaking, because Lord knows Rory doesn't play ball. But, you know, something else that's come to mind is when Luke and April are returning the rock polisher in Santa's Secret Stuff. And Lorelai and Rory run into them at the science store, at the Discovery store. I don't know what it is, but it's like, you know, they're looking for a Christmas gift for Chris, and they run into each other, and Rory recounts some stories about gifts that Luke has gotten her in the past, because April is like, my dad's always been a great gift giver. You know who made him that way? Lorelai. You know who pushed him into that? Lorelai. And, you know, Rory tells stories about like monogrammed hand towels and unicorn marionettes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And my question is, what kind of self-respecting grown man goes through a monogramming phase and thinks that preteen girls want everything with lots of unicorns? Something about the scene is endearing, and something about it is cringe and makes no sense. And yeah, I love a good monogram, and even I have not gone through a monogramming phase. Just gonna say, like, something about the writing of that and the fact that it's like coming from Luke. It was one of those like season 7 moments where it was just like, I'm sorry, do you know Luke Danes? Have you met Luke Danes? Whoever's writing this scene, just, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know that Rory necessarily thinks about him that way. I think Lorelai can kind of see it, especially because she's romantically linked with him. And there is a phase when it looks like he's going to become her stepfather, at which point, yeah, he would have, like, maybe you can argue it later, like, for the revival, but even then, like, they don't have that many scenes together, and it's mostly just banter. It doesn't go any deeper or show him, like, truly being a sounding board for her. And yeah,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think he's a good guy, and what he did for her and Lorelai was nice, but it doesn't mean she views him as a father figure.
I concur. Very well said. Should we move on to getting to speaking about Anna a little bit more?
I just wanted to touch on Jess real quickly, too, because Jess really is the first person we see him attempting to parent more directly. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think we covered a lot in our Jess episode, but I just wanted to, like, give him some lip service here, because obviously it gives us one of the most iconic moments, or a few of the most iconic moments in the entire show, Me raising a kid, I don't even like kids. They're always sticky, you know, like they've got jam on their hands. Even if there's no jam in the house, somehow they've always got jam on their hands. I am not the right guy to deal with that. I have no patience for jam hands. And then, of course, the pushing him into the lake. Just epic, iconic, no notes, beautiful. And you know, just kind of how he tries to step into his authoritative parental mode, but ultimately Jess is not his son. He doesn't have the same pull, and Jess is just troubled, and so it's hard for him. But I do love that over time they find a dynamic that works. And see, I think he is more of a father figure to Jess, not just because they live together directly and are related. Like, he could still play that fun uncle role, but he plays more of a direct fatherly role by protecting Jess, by, you know, I don't love this moment, but when he kind of tells Jimmy to skedaddle without talking to Jess so that he doesn't get him off path. And, you know, the way he tries to look out for him, include him in stuff, protect his feelings. The fact that he thinks he's discovered the secret to parenting. Imagine the future you want, and if you must lie to bring it about, that don't take parenting advice from Luke Danes. And just eventually, you know, he gives him that self-help book, and it really helps Jess learn how to handle his emotions a little bit better. And I think that opens a lot of doors, both in their relationship and Jess's relationships with other people. And so I did just want to pay a quick homage to their beautiful kind of father-son dynamic.
Yeah, and I think that even if, you know, Jess himself would never want to admit it, Luke did really important work and was successful in really investing in Jess's life and being just a good support system and really helping him grow into the person that we end up seeing in the revival. I think, you know, there's still growth to be had there. But Luke did, I think, a really, like you said, beautiful job of investing in Jess's life for the time that they were together, trying to get him on the path of staying in school, not throwing your life away. You don't need to be working 40 to 50 hours a week at Walmart. You know, you can do better than driving a forklift for the rest of your life. You know, care about yourself, care about who you are, your education, you know, how intelligent of a person you are, and what you can give to the world with all of that. And don't just, you know, Jess was in the mindset of just, I'm not worth anything, so I'm, you know, this is just what my life is going to be. And I think that stems from, you know, him never having any sort of parent who actually cared. You know, Liz was there, but I just don't even think she was a support system to her own son. I think Luke was the first person that genuinely was invested in wanting to see Jess do better.
Yeah, all very well said. And just like one last funny little note on the secret of parenting scene from Bracebridge dinner. He's like, "What? You've never lied to your kid before?" And Lorelai's like, "Well, yeah, to save her from great physical pain." When she was little and she would play in the kitchen, I told her that the burners were the devil's hands, and I would say in a really scary evangelist voice, you know, "Don't touch the devil's hands." She still won't go near the stove.
Yeah.
I just love that line so much, and I had to. But yes, now let's get on to Anna. And you know, I need to start this off by saying, WTF, Anna? Just what?
Yeah. I don't like I just don't like her. And I mean, granted, you know, the fandom does not love April, but I really just loathe Anna. First off, for keeping your kid a secret for 12 years, like, what in the actual, you know what, like, that is abhorrent. And, you know, I'm not going to go off the deep end talking about, you know, parental or women's rights. Like, you know, she had the right to birth Anna into the world. But Luke never, you know, he wasn't, you know, there was no DV or any sort of negative things like that coming into play. You know, he wasn't abusive. Like, I think he would have stepped up had he known about April, you know, from the time of birth, and, you know, said, like, you know, I'll be here in her life if I can. Like, do you need some financial assistance? It was deplorable, I think, for Anna to just keep April's identity and existence a secret for all of those years. And it takes April seeking out, like, I want to know who my father is. It's a very clear-cut decision on April's part, because obviously if she didn't care, she wouldn't have done it. But April obviously has a vested interest in, I want to know who my dad is. And I will just, dump on Anna, because it's like, you denied your kid a second parent for all of those years, and now she's very actively seeking it out because she wants it. You took that choice away from her. Maybe even when April was 5, 6, 7, starting to understand things a little bit better, have a conversation with her and say, like, hey, do you ever think you would want to know who your dad is? How do you feel about that? And granted, a 5-year-old may not be able to articulate, what their desires are super well, but start bringing that up and having those conversations of, do you think you'd want to know who this person is? Are you okay with not knowing? How do you feel about it? But she just never had that conversation. The decision ended up having to be solely in April's hands. And her decision was, obviously, I really do want to know who this person is.
Yeah. You're right. We shouldn't go off on like the parental rights side of this for too long, but I feel like I would be remiss not to say something about it. Pregnancy is a medical decision, and there are no laws requiring you to divulge personal medical information. And so it's not illegal what Anna did. But I feel like the situation becomes that much more complicated when it shifts from being a medical issue into being a legal issue, into being a rights issue, when the fetus is transitioned into being a full-blown human being with thoughts and feelings and, cultural beliefs about parenthood and the roles of mothers and fathers in their lives, and the way that fathers are included in all of that. And it seems like in a lot of ways there are systemic biases towards women in the court system. It's possibly a little overstated exactly how big that chasm is. But, again, as someone who has spent a decent amount of time in family court, the majority of the cases I sat on, without giving any further detail, one, because I don't remember specifics, and two, because that would not be good, but like most of them were primary custody and residence with mother. That was just how it was. And dads can often be at a disadvantage with, having to pay quite a bit in child support, and that often leaving them destitute or arrested for non-payment and for arrears, which further screws them over because they have to take undesirable jobs where they don't make enough money because they have a criminal record for not paying their child support. And it's not a great outcome for anyone, I think, when parents can't communicate well. I understand the degradation of relationships and the fact that, sometimes you can't be with another person. But it's like, if you're going to bring a child into the world, you owe it to them to effectively co-parent, unless there is a very legitimate reason to keep the other parent out. And I think the discussion also shows our gender biases and our stereotypes that we have, where we assume that mothers are better parents when that's not maybe necessarily the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really should be on a case-by-case basis, because there are plenty of men who are perfectly capable of doing a great job at parenting. And there are a lot of women who are not good parents, who are dangerous to their kids as well. It's not exclusively that men are dangerous or abusive or bad parents. I think that is a really messed up cultural assumption, and I don't like to play into that. And I think that's kind of part of where we get the Anna story from, because they have that conversation when Luke first finds out and then goes to talk to Anna. And she's like, come on, we were already broken up. And I knew how you felt about kids. You hate kids. We would go to the movies before 10 o'clock at night in case there were kids in the theater. We would move tables in a restaurant if they seated us near a family. You would flip out if you saw a woman breastfeeding in public. You couldn't stand to watch diaper commercials. And you had an unnatural hatred of Macaulay Culkin. And it's one of those things where she makes the decision not to tell him based on these superficial things. And like, something about it really doesn't sit right with me from a moral standpoint of just like, just because he doesn't like kids, I don't think that gives you the right to not tell him about the birth of his child. I could maybe understand keeping it on the DL until the kid is born, because again, the medical information, and sometimes unfortunately pregnancies do not go to term, and so to open that Pandora's box before the child is even here, sure, maybe that doesn't make sense, but she just made this assumption that completely undercut his rights and took away a chunk of time. Like, I think a lot of people feel that way, where it's just like you go out in public and other people's kids suck, and it's just like, oh God, they're loud and they're running around and they're in my way, and they're ruining my nice dinner or whatever it is. But then when they have their own kids, it's a very different dynamic. And I think that would have been the case here. I mean, obviously when Anna got pregnant, they were probably in their mid-20s, and now they're in their late 30s, early 40s, something like that. And maybe Luke did a lot of growing up in the meanwhile, but that still doesn't give her the right to unilaterally make a decision that could affect his parental rights. He didn't sign them away. She didn't offer for him to sign away his parental rights. She gave him absolutely no choices. And in the end, I think maybe the person who lost out, well, the two people who lost out were April and Luke. She took away experiences that most people live for, seeing their child born, watching them grow up, watching them graduate, watching them become really interesting people. And you can see that regret in Luke, where he's just like, I didn't know that she had a website and that she wore a back brace. She had just read Deanie. I should have known that she had just read Deanie. And, you can see just in hindsight just how wrong that decision was. And, maybe it is because of the benefit of hindsight and, understanding as an audience. Maybe Anna didn't have that. Again, it felt very like Lorelai when she made the decision to parent Rory alone, but at least Lorelai left the door open to Chris. Chris obviously knew about the pregnancy and was able to come and go as he pleased, whatever the outcome of that was for everyone. But Anna didn't even give him the chance or the information. Like, sure, let him dick off if he doesn't want to be a dad, but at least give him the information so he can make a choice for himself. She's completely removed that opportunity for him to know his child and for her child to have, hopefully, a father figure of some sort.
Yeah. And again, we even hear Anna say, like, at one point in time to Luke, like, well, I didn't send her to you. I didn't do this. She figured it out on her own. But again, like, wake up, Anna. Your kid was obviously at that point in time wanting to know, like I said a couple minutes ago, who her father was, trying to figure out who this person is. And then, maybe April figures out who her dad is, whether it's Luke or whether it was one of the other two guys, and decides, actually, I don't think I want to have a relationship with them. But give her that choice and let her make that decision. But you stripped that from her for the first 12 years of her life. And I have to think that if Anna hadn't done that legwork to try and, figure out, who's my dad, and I have my, uncle who's going to help me run a paternity test. If she had never done that, Anna probably would have continued on for the rest of April's life, just being like, she never needs to know. I'm never going to tell her. I'm going to withhold this. What are you, like, you're just taking away so much from your kid that she's obviously seeking out. And like you said as well, Luke suffers from it for it, with the regrets that he has for missing out on a huge chunk of April's life. And now he has to make up for all of that lost time.
Yeah, I just realized something. Do we not remember when Rory went to Anna's store and was like, oh, you have really cool stuff here? And Anna said, yeah, well, I like to stock one-of-a-kind things. I'm very much into the this is mine and you can't have it scene. Must be an only child thing. How does April have an uncle if Anna is an only child and doesn't know her dad? Is he like just some other random male figure? Is it her great uncle? Like her grandmother's brother? Like, who is this person? Like, have I made that connection before? Because holy moly, how does she have an uncle? Is it
I have not until now, but there's and there's another writing loophole, flaw, whatever.
Yeah, again, with not being able to have a consistent background for your characters. We don't know all that much about Anna outside of all of this, but like, I mean, one thing I will give her some credit for is that she did a better job at setting clear boundaries with Luke early on about keeping promises that he makes to April, and setting some ground rules, being like, you're either all in or you're all out. You're not going to do this. You're not going to drag her around and say that you're going to be there and then not show up. And I also find that's an interesting kind of parallel to what he says to Lorelai in season 5. I'm in, I'm all in. And so it makes me wonder, like, can he be all in on both? Is it just sort of like a foreshadowing that Luke can only do one thing at a time? He can't multitask.
No,
But
there is no foreshadowing whatsoever as to how that's going to play out when Lorelai learns about that. We'll talk about it in 2 weeks.
yeah. But I do like that she held Luke to task and was like, you're accountable for what you say to my daughter, and you can't constantly be disappointing her. Lorelai never did that with Chris. She never set up that expectation. She lets him off the hook from the beginning and then disparages him for being flaky whenever he does try to do the right thing and be there for them, but then just kind of returns to his normal life because they're not his normal life, right? And so I just thought that was sort of an interesting parallel there. But why don't we move on to the birthday party? Because I have thoughts about the birthday party. How do you feel about how Anna reacted to Lorelai throwing herself into the birthday party? Like, just kind of showing up when Luke was flailing, and then Anna going off the rails about it.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this in the past. I will say that I do think she had some, ground to stand on with being concerned, especially because you're not only entrusting your daughter into Luke's care for an entire afternoon, and, as it plays out like a sleepover, but you're entrusting, a dozen other girls into his care as well. You need to know and be comfortable that the person that you're trusting to supervise these children is someone who is safe, that, you don't have to worry about at the end of the day in terms of, being irresponsible or harming those kids. So from that perspective, I can see how she is, as a concerned parent, would be like, well, who is this person that I don't know the first thing about, coming in and supervising my child? I get that, because I feel like if I was a parent as well, I want to know who my kid is being supervised by and that they're in good hands. So I understand that. However, I think there is a bit of an overreaction there to what Lorelai did, when her intentions, I think, were just solely, I just want to give this kid a really good and fun birthday party at this point in time, because look at what I'm seeing. These girls are just sitting around the diner moping because they don't have anything fun to do. This is really important for April. She's, I think, trying to establish some really important friendships at this time. Like, this birthday party could really be key for that. If these girls have fun and they can just, enjoy themselves, maybe they start interacting with her more at school. She can just have more solidified friendships and start socializing more with these girls. And so I think, again, Lorelai's intentions were, on the whole, just really good, with saying, Luke doesn't really know what he's doing here in terms of how to throw a birthday party for a bunch of preteen girls. I have a daughter. I've been here. I've done this before. Let me try and make this a really fun afternoon and party for April. And so I really think it was an overreaction on Anna's part to say you had no right to step in that way, when the intentions were just really wholesome ones, I think, at that point in time.
Yeah, this whole situation really could have been avoided. That's what makes it suck the hardest. Obviously we have Luke and Lorelai walking through town, and Luke spots the toiletry kit with cats all over it and is like, hey, what do you think of that as a gift for April? And Lorelai's like, no. It says happy birthday, now go clean yourself. I think she's right about that. It's just, you can't always trust your intuition. Dad mode hasn't fully kicked in yet to understand this one. But that was a moment where Lorelai sort of offered up her credentials, if you will, which is just like, I have thrown many a great teenage girl birthday parties, and Luke is so in his head about, I have to do this myself. I don't even want any input from you. It's like, it's not even about whether she's there or not. It's about getting ideas from her, getting advice about how to keep things going. Like he just assumes that some balloons and a deck of cards or something is going to be enough to entertain 10 preteen girls for several hours. And it's just like, once again, another example of the writers making Luke dumb so that Lorelai can look great. Mm-hmm. And so there's that component of things. Like, just ask for her help. She doesn't have to be there. And so you put yourself in a situation where you needed an emergency rescue. And that's what got you into trouble, because it was unplanned. And therefore you couldn't run it by Anna. You couldn't even say, hey, like, I got some ideas from my fiance. She understands that I'm still processing this and developing my personal relationship with April, and she's keeping her distance and respecting that wish. But, she is a great mom and she has great ideas, and, I'm really glad to have this supportive partner. It's all an issue of bad communication. And, Luke is obviously at the epicenter of it, and we know that he's not the best communicator. I feel like I had a note about him with Anna as well. So, like, backing up a little bit, when he tries to sort of duck out of having April come to the diner after their like park date, and she's like, why don't I just come to the diner? He tries to cancel, and Anna's like, no, Luke, this isn't how it's going to be. You're all in or you're all out. And I feel like that was an opportunity for him to be like, look, I have a partner who doesn't really know about this yet. And you know why I didn't see it? It's because it's in another document, but I'm going to talk about it here anyway. Like, I haven't found a way to tell my partner yet. She comes by the diner a lot. I don't want them to meet yet. And I don't think it's time for them to meet yet. And if I'm, unable to find a way to tell her about it, then there's a chance that like they could interact too soon. And I don't want that. And I don't think you want that. So, there was a way to pitch it to Anna where it's just like, I'm not trying to like rescind from our agreement. I just don't know if this is the best place for us to do it because of and it's one of those things where it's like, it's the freaking diner. It's in the middle of town. Like, everyone will see this and be like, who is this kid? And it will find its way back to Lorelai. What did Luke think he was doing with that in the first place? If he had just explained, like, look, it's a very public setting, like, it might be better for us to find another thing to do instead at another time. And hopefully April will understand. That could have gone a long way to building a bridge with Anna and be like, what would you suggest? Where do you think April would love to go that I could take her some other time, where we just get to hang out and do a fun activity as opposed to having her hang around at my work where my fiance will come by, I think it was just fumbled from top to bottom, as I've said before. But yeah, anyway, go back to the birthday party. I think she catastrophized it. I don't know why she blew this so far out of proportion, because it's one of those things where it's like, you entrusted this task to Luke. You either trust Luke or you don't, right? And I know that they're still in that stage of developing trust, but obviously things went okay. The kids came back with all their fingers and all their toes. And even though Lorelai was the one who was prominently upstairs with the girls, Luke was just a shout away if something went wrong. It's not like he dicked off and went to the arcade all night or left to go sleep somewhere else entirely. He was still in the diner on the premises. Like, it's not like he's just like, I'm not really here for this, so you take over. And all of the girls called their parents and got permission to stay the night. They said, we're here with, like, they must have said, we're here with Luke and we're here with his fiance. Like, where the hell was Anna? I know that she couldn't throw the party, but like, did April not call her and mention this? And obviously I said that Anna did a good job at setting expectations with Luke, but there were, from what I recall, no expectations set around Lorelai. I don't know how much she knew about Lorelai, how much Luke had told her. They had never met, obviously. And so for her to jump to the conclusion of just like, I can't trust this woman. What are you doing? Like, I don't think she ever told Luke, hey, keep your girlfriend away from my kid until you're married. I don't recall that ever happening. Maybe off stage, off screen, it happened. But, how is Luke supposed to know that it's not okay for his girlfriend to help with this party if that expectation wasn't set? Because they're not communicating with each other about how to do this effectively, And I don't agree with her stance that it's like, how am I supposed to trust you with my kid when it's like the party went really well. You got good feedback from your daughter about this. Your daughter sees a lot of you in Luke's girlfriend, If you had asked April a little bit more, be like, oh, so tell me about Luke's girlfriend. She would have been like, oh, she's so cool. She's really nice. She reminds me of you. And that might have been like the best review Lorelai could have gotten from anyone with regards to Anna. Luke could say whatever he wants to about her and she would just have to take it at face value. But coming from April, that would really mean something. And the other thing I hate about the situation is how, Lorelai goes to Anna at the end and is just like, I'm a great person. I've got references. I'm a single mom too. I get it. It was all my fault. And I'm like, no, it was not your fault. It's not your fault that you tried to help and Luke didn't take any of your suggestions. It's not your fault that he didn't clear this with Anna. It's not your fault for trying to make this a great party. You shouldn't have to save Luke in her eyes when it's his relationship to manage with her. I didn't love her trying to take the fall, especially because the situation was blown out of proportion in the first place. I think she was just scared and maybe a little jealous as well, because it's like, April really had a great time at this party and I wasn't the one throwing it for her. Luke's girlfriend came in and helped, and maybe April's gonna start to bond with her and she's not gonna be as into me anymore. Like maybe she's worried about that adolescent stage where the kids start to pull away, and she was worried that Lorelai was going to be that magnetic pull. Maybe April did tell her something about Lorelai and was just like, she's so amazing, she's so fun. And Anna was just like, oh crap. No. There was just something so unhinged about it. It almost felt like there was a tinge of jealousy, and definitely sort of like, I am losing my mind about this for no real good reason. I don't know. The whole situation was just perplexing to me.
Yeah. And there are definitely a lot of parallels there too between how Lorelai felt when Rory started to get close to Emily and Richard. I think it was that same sort of jealousy, that same sort of like, she is bonding with people outside of just me. And now my daughter is no longer going to, like, I'm not going to be her worldview and her focus. And she's, meeting new people, establishing new friendships, building stronger bonds with other family members. And so it's not all about me anymore. And so I think it's just, very much Anna is Lorelai 2.0 in these later seasons, where she's just becoming, like you said, I think very too jealous that her daughter is starting to spend time and carving out significant relationships with people that are not just her anymore. But it's like, that's healthy. That's good. You need to let your kid grow and have those friendships and socialize. And so Anna and Lorelai's jealousy, I think, is very much one-to-one. I think it was just, she was doing exactly what Lorelai did and feeling that exact same way. But you've got to cut the cord and let your kid grow up in the world and meet other people and have these friendships. But also going back to what you said with the whole birthday party thing, it really just boils down to communicate a little bit better. That's really all it is. If you're just transparent with what is going on and saying like, hey, she's here, she's helping me out with the birthday party. And then what you said, if there's a conversation with April and April's like, she has a lot of really good qualities, she's really cool. She was nice to me and all of my friends, helped us, with like nail painting and just making my party really awesome. Take that and just for Anna, run with it and just know, okay, well, this is probably a person that could also be a really good investment for my daughter as well, if potentially she's going to be, a stepmom down the line. But just talk and communicate better. And it really just boils down to that there wasn't enough of that.
Totally. Part of me is so dubious of that whole conversation that they have in her store where she's just like, April doesn't meet anyone that I'm dating until I'm ready to get married. And I'm like, well, like, how can you know that you're going to be able to marry a person who hasn't met your daughter and you haven't seen how they interact? I also think that she's wrong when she says that engaged isn't married and people get engaged all the time. I mean, statistically speaking, sure, engagements break off because weddings are very stressful. There's a lot of politics. Families can come into conflict, and ultimately, maybe it doesn't turn out. But I think it's kind of a fallacy to assume that marriages are stable and relationships or engagements are not, simply because marriages are harder to exit. It doesn't make them good relationships, and it doesn't make them stable. There are people who have been together for years and years and aren't married and never plan to get married, and they're probably some of the best relationships out there. And so I think it's reductionist for her to feel that way and to express that and be like, you're not meeting my daughter until you're married. I think that was a big reason why Lorelai was like, it's now or it's never. Let's go to Maryland. Let's get married, because she was so worried that, this lack of marriage and commitment was indicative of the strength of her relationship with Luke, which we'll get to in part 3. And also that, they could never move forward until they were married. Like, it's sort of a cart before the horse thing because of Anna's presence and this sort of directive from her that is just like, sorry, you're not developing a relationship with my kid until you're married. And you better hope you get along after that, because legally you're stuck here now. I think it was, short-sighted for them to think that it had to go in that order. And I didn't like it. But it also makes me think, jumping ahead a little bit, Anna decides to move them to New Mexico. And I'm like, isn't it a little hypocritical for you to rag on Luke about being like, no, Luke, you're not going to come into my kid's life and then just take off again. You've got to be here, or you have to stay out of it so that April doesn't get attached and then you leave. And she says the same thing about Lorelai, where she's like, how do I know she's not going to get attached to you and then you'll leave? Anna's the one who ups and moves April across the country away from her dad, who, she was all cool with letting them hang and letting them be father-daughter, letting Luke step into the parental role when she couldn't, like with going to Philadelphia and throwing the birthday party. And then she's going to cut off that relationship because she's the only one who gets to make decisions. I was rewatching those episodes earlier and like watching her face and her performance, and she's just so bitter and condescending and angry about everything. Like, she's so possessive and so unhappy that there's anyone else in her daughter's life and that she can't call every single shot. And that's a big part of the reason I just like really dislike Anna.
Yeah, it's extremely harmful and manipulative to your own daughter as well, because she is just starting to have this groundbreaking, really awesome new relationship with her biological dad, and you yank that away from her once again. It could be so emotionally damaging to April. You didn't ask her, sit your daughter down and be like, how are things going with your dad? Even if Anna is wanting to move to New Mexico for a job, for another partner, just whatever the reason is, sit your kid down and say, this is something that's on the horizon, perhaps. Like, how's your relationship with your dad going? Do you want to continue to maintain it? Maybe there's some sort of arrangement we can work out where, we'll still move, but you can fly home back to the East Coast once a weekend or like once a week out of the month to spend time with him. But she just completely dismisses her own daughter's choice and relationship, and just, again, it's a disservice to April. It's a disservice to Luke. It's not okay to just completely manipulate the situation to, again, just, it's all about me. It's all about what I want. No one else gets to make a choice here. It's abhorrent. And again, I hate Anna for it. I hate using like the hate term, but like, oh goodness. Like, I think it's one of the most horrible things that you could have ever done to your kid.
Yeah, I don't bandy about the word hate very much. And I feel like I've used it a few times already in this episode for good reason. But yeah, Luke is the one who is doing that work where he can see how distressing this is to April. She doesn't want to leave. She's only just, found a group of friends where she feels like she can be herself. And now she has to start all over. And she's like, I'm just going to be the weird kid all over again. And, Luke is the one who's like, let's come up with solutions. You can come on spring break and you can come on Thanksgiving or Christmas. You can come during the summer. I'll fly back and forth. Like, he's the one trying to come up with ideas. And, his biggest problem was telling them to April before running them by Anna. And so then that scene where they're sitting in the coffee shop and Anna's like, you have no right making promises to my daughter. Listen, Luke, these are my decisions. I'm not going to have you going behind my back making promises to April that I can't keep. I'm not ready to make decisions, and they're my decisions to make, not yours. And I hate that scene. Like,
also, no, they're not just your decisions to make. They are Luke's to make as well. He is now actively involved in his child's life. We don't know what that financial situation is if he had started contributing in that way. But even still, there is now an emotional investment on both April and Luke's part. You have no right whatsoever to take that away from them. And to remove Luke's parental rights right now, which, not to tangentialize or go into it, because that could be its entire episode. Like, what are, father and parental rights like within the state of Connecticut? But he has them and they're there. And Anna had no right to do what she did. And just to, again, the damage that you're doing to not only Luke, but to your daughter. Again, I'm not a parent, but I just could never see hurting my child in that way. It just,
yeah,
it's
I understand.
A display of it's the opposite of love for your kid.
Yeah, I understand the need to move. I do. And Luke wasn't saying, hey, you can't move. You can't take her out of state. He wasn't saying any of that. He just said, like, hey, I want to make this transition easy for her. I want to maintain a relationship and stay in her life. I want her to be happy. And Anna just bulldozes the whole situation. And then, of course, we have the scene where Luke goes to her door and he's like, you're always telling me I can't do this with your daughter and I can't do that with your daughter. Well, she's not just your daughter, Anna. She's my daughter, too. I know I wasn't around for all those years, but that was your decision. That was your choice. And frankly, it was a damn lousy one. I didn't get to see her born or take her first steps or take her to her first day of school. None of it. And I can never get any of that back. It's gone. That's not going to happen anymore. That I can guarantee you. She's our kid. She's not just yours. And I'm not going to let you treat me this way. I'm her father. God, why do I even have to say that? I mean, April and I, we have this relationship, and you can't just decide things. That's not how this works. I mean, we have to make decisions together, decisions about April, and I will fight you. I will fight you for that, Anna, if I have to. I have rights. I'm her father, and I have rights. And again, go back, watch the scene, look at Anna's face as Luke is saying all this to her. She looks so condescending in this moment. And I just want to slap her upside the head and be like, this man is right. His delivery could use a little bit of finesse, but she's like, she feels threatened by this. And then in the next episode, April is supposed to go over. She hasn't shown up. Luke calls Anna and says, is April on her way? And she's like, no, she's not going to be coming to see you. Like, I'm not comfortable with her being around you right now after you threatened me. And I'm like, okay, if the man has to threaten you to stay in his daughter's life, like I'm sorry, get your head out of your own ass for a second and realize what he's doing here. He is proving to you how much he knows her, how much he's willing to stay in her life, how willing he is to fight for their relationship. And that's actually kind of a great thing. And the fact that he got heated, he wasn't threatening you. He wasn't like, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to try to take her away from you. There's none of that. I mean, granted, he's Luke. He's always got a little bit of that intensity to him. But I don't think it was a threat necessarily. And Anna just completely pulls the plug and is just like, nope, I'm making this decision. This is my decision to make. Bye. And yeah, no, not cool. And then, of course, that brings us to the custody battle. Court sucks. Family court is heartbreaking. It's terrible. Nobody wants to be there. But ultimately, going outside of the court system usually screws one person. And in this case, with them trying to keep the parenting decisions as just, a joint decision-making process and not going through the courts has screwed Luke. And so he tries to take matters into his own hands, and he's like, I want partial custody. And his lawyer has to have a talk with him and be like, this is a best case scenario, and I'm not really in the best case scenario business. At the end of the day, like, whether it was your choice not to be there or not, she has an existing relationship with her mother that is ongoing, and the court is going to look at that versus how long you've been around, and they may not look kindly on all of this background, because it's not about what you want and it's not about what Anna wants. The court only cares about what's best for April, and they most often side with the mother. So you can make your case, but just know that you may not get this. And he's very right. Like, custody battles are not about what's fair. The best interest of the child is the standard, at least in Canada and the US. And, that leaves a lot of room for subjectivity. So I do love the court episode, though. And I love the letter that Lorelai writes that the judge and she sort of like read as a voiceover to that whole scene. In that scene, Lorelai does sort of refer to Luke as a father-like figure for Rory, but at the same time, it's like she's trying to emphasize that for his benefit, and again, she's just waxing nostalgic about the times that Luke was there for Rory and did nice things without necessarily seeing the bigger picture of what a father would have actually been in Rory's life. But I do love that Luke fought for his rights and that he won, because I think in this particular instance, yeah, he deserved what he was asking for in, for her to come visit and for him to go visit them. And I really hope that his relationship with Anna smoothed out. It seems like it did a little bit, after the court decision, but Anna is just so vicious to him when they're sitting in the hall waiting to be called in. She's like, you've never had a consistent relationship with anyone. How am I supposed to, or how is that the judge supposed to expect you to have one with my kid? It's just like, he makes a good point. I've never been anything but a good father to her. And it's just,
yeah, I will say, the reading of the letter and the way, they had both voices coming in, I thought that was really beautifully done. Comments have been made about how that letter is also just a love letter to Luke. And I think it very much was at that point in time. There was definitely emphasis more on Luke as a father figure, like you said, than probably what he actually put forth within Rory's life. But Lorelai was also very much telling the truth in that letter about Luke's character and about the potential that he had to continue to be a really good father figure and positive role model for Anna. And so I understand it should always be about, the best interest of the child. But in this case, us as the viewer, I think anyone watching, we know that what is in Anna's best interest right now is going to be to allow Luke Danes to continue to be a regular and consistent and active part of her life, and that his presence is going to be what is best for her at this moment in time. So I'm glad that the decision was made to allow him to have that joint custody, and that it's a win for Anna as much as it is a win for Luke. Like, just the both of them made out well that day in the way that it needed to happen.
You keep referring to April as Anna, and I'm like,
I know.
It reminds me of how we always screw up Lorelai and
Rory. Yeah.
And it just goes to show that it's like 2.0, where it's the same situation, and it's hard to keep them straight sometimes.
Yeah.
But I find it so funny that
watching, what we're talking about.
Yeah, I just find it just so interesting. Like, we both make the same slip ups on that. Mm-hmm. But yes, exactly. We've seen April be very upset, and when she was sort of forced to stay away from Luke and she had to sneak over under the auspices of going to the Boston Science Museum so that they could exchange Christmas presents, she was like, I missed you so much. We can see how much she cares about Luke as well, and we know that she wants him in her life. And so I'm really glad that the judge was able to see what we could see, and that Luke wasn't screwed in this process. And obviously we'll get more into Luke's relationship with April more specifically next week. But obviously, I wanted to start with Anna because she really is the crux of this all, and where all of these problems stem from, because she was the one who made all these choices. And Luke's right, they were lousy ones. She was being selfish and too independent for her own good. And I just don't like the way she handled the situation at basically any point in time. At least Lorelai has her moments where I'm like, okay, I get you. I see what you did there. I understand. But with Anna, I'm just like, why? Why must you be like this?
Yeah. And again, I think it's just, echoing back everything that we've already talked about. But it's very heartwarming that situation ended in the way that it did, that custody was given to Luke, that April is going to continue to allow, and just have her father be a part of her life. And, Anna, if you're listening, like, deal with it. Just grow up and deal with it. And she's probably, like, even after that decision, is just, stewing for weeks and months on end, because it's not what she wanted, and she doesn't have full control and access to her daughter anymore. But just grow the F up. Like, this is your kid, and this is what's best for her. And again, if you love your child, like, you need to find a way to be okay with this.
Yeah, she refers to April as her world. And again, it feels sort of like the Lorelai Rory dynamic, where there's a codependency there, and there's a hard time differentiating and separating. And, she's going to have to get used to it eventually, that April is really becoming her own person and starting to assert her feelings about the conduct of her own life. And it's sad that it took a court order to allow for this to happen. But in the end, yeah, it was a happy outcome for April and Luke, the only people who matter in this scenario. Anna can go kick rocks.
I concur.
And that is a lovely place to leave this episode, I think. What a delightful sentiment to leave off on.
Kick rocks, Anna. See you next week.
Peace out, Anna. We're done with you. God.
Bye, Felicia, Anna.
I've been waiting to talk about this for so long because I've had so many pent up emotions about this woman. Oh, I could not imagine, what if I got pregnant and Dan and I split after that and I didn't tell him? I could not live with myself. I couldn't. And I asked him about this too. I don't even remember what we said. This was like a week ago now, but I was like, what would you do if you had someone come to you from your past and say, I have a kid? Like, how would you integrate me? What would your thoughts be? What would your first steps be? When do you think you would tell me about it? And he's like, I don't think I'd make it more than a week before, like, wrapping my head around it and trying to figure out how and when I want to involve you. And I'm like, still feels a little long, but okay. Yeah, we'll get there more when we talk about the Lorelai side of stuff too. But like, I can't wrap my mind around anything Anna did. I can't abide her mental backflips for justifications of keeping her kid away from her dad. Yep. I can't.
Yep. But that's where we're going to leave off this one. Come back and join us next week, where we'll highlight some of Luke's best and worst dad moments. Not only as it pertains to April, but just also with a little bit how he interacted with, Rory and Jess, as well as a sort of pseudo father figure. But we hope you'll be back and join us for that. And we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation in the meantime. If you have any thoughts about Anna, April, Luke, Lorelai, this whole dynamic, how all of that played out from the start, drop us a comment and let us know, because we'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Indeed. And once again, I come to you with an announcement about FanFest, because we will not shut up about it until it's gone. And then we might have a couple week break until they announce the next one. And then it'll just be, a cycle that repeats itself forever. But come join us in Connecticut in October from the 18th to the 20th in Guilford. It's going to be amazing. They keep announcing the guests from the show, from the cast and crew. Everyone is so delightful. The fandom is welcoming and warm and loving. And the cast and crew are so much fun. I really can't wait to do more karaoke with Eris. I'm so excited. So don't sleep on getting a ticket, because you will not regret it. It's just the most amazing Stars Hollow weekend you could ever imagine.
Yep. And in all likelihood, this will probably be an event that ends up selling out. So don't wait to get your ticket. We will include a link to that website in the description below, where you can buy a ticket. If you have any questions about it, there's also a link to a Facebook planning group for the event, where any member of that community will happily answer any questions about the event that you may have. But absolutely consider coming, because it is just the best weekend of the year and you will not regret it.
Yeah, come hang out with us. And on that note, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe on the way out if you haven't already. Drop us your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next Friday for dinner.
Take care.
Bye.